Hello everyone, my name is Andrei and I'm glad to see all of you at Winter Data Meetup organized by Data Zen community. Today we meet Taryn Hess, a business expert helping teams grow with data, digital and AI skills. Learn how these skills drive innovations and make business stronger. And today we will get practical tips to build a future-ready workplace. Before we jump into our session, I'd love to take a moment to ask you for your support in growing our community and recognizing our speaker. If you are enjoying today's discussion and want to stay updated on upcoming events, please hit the like and subscribe buttons below. Your participation not only acknowledging our efforts, but also helps us reach a wider audience and allowing more people to learn these insightful discussions. Also, in the video description, you will find a link to the talk page where you can share your feedback, award the speaker the badge, and rate the session. And additionally, we'd love to hear from you through the talk. So please post your questions to the chat, and we will answer them during the Q&A session at the end of this talk. And now let's welcome our speaker, Taryn. So Taryn, the floor is yours. Please unmute your mic.
I'm muted. First
Yeah.
technical glitch. I am unmuted now. Okay, thank you, Andre. I'm excited to speak with you all today and to talk to you about something that is near and dear to my heart, which is especially data and culture change and thinking about skills and how do we upskill ourselves and be prepared for some of the change that is coming. So, as I'm going to talk a little bit about myself and then get into it. So, I have been in this space more or less 2 decades, focusing on the people side of transformation, specifically within the last, let's say, 5 or so years, really focusing in on data even more. So, currently, I'm a principal in the talent enablement and transformation practice. I have, as I mentioned, a passion for data literacy and also focusing on cultural change. As a part of that passion, I also created a culture change framework that we're going to talk a little bit about today. And it's really a, a great tool to be able to operationalize change. So when we often think about culture, it can be very nebulous. And I also have a PhD in instructional design and technology. So, our agenda for our session today is to start by defining what are data, digital, and AI, specifically literacy. So, thinking about what are these different things that we need to know, and what are the table stakes when it comes to these three technology areas. Then, why is this important for us? Looking at that then from a lens of how do we shift things? How do we make change happen? And then also some different success factors on making that real. So before we get into what does this mean in terms of business success and how do we leverage these three areas from that people lens to drive business, we have to set the stage. We have to take a step back and really look at, well, what do we mean by these three things? So I want to start by defining what are these three areas and looking at it from a few different lenses. So we're going to start by thinking about it from a literacy lens, which is really setting that foundational stage when it comes to people's skills and the knowledge they need to have. So from a digital standpoint, this really means the ability to access, retrieve, and to manipulate data. And of course, with the thought and the intention to communicate with using these different technologies. Digital is definitely not a new thing. All of us use it every single day. So this is not something new to us. We use it socially, so in our professional and our personal lives. We use it all the time. We use these technologies to communicate and to use information in different ways that we need to use them. So that's the digital side of things. AI. AI is in a different space in that although it's been around since the 1950s, it's really taking a big leap forward more recently. And we're seeing a lot of attention on this, a lot of advancements within this area. So when it comes to literacy, that foundational thing that we need to be able to know to be able to leverage AI. It's the ability to interact and contribute, yes, responsibly, which I have in italics there, to the development of it in using AI. So again, a little different from digital in that although it's been around for some time, we're seeing this big influx. And when it comes to the foundational literacy that we need to have to be able to use it, is interacting and contributing to it. Now, you couple this with data, and data literacy is really the ability to read, write, analyze, and communicate with data in context, of course, with the intention of informing decisions and to solve problems. So data is in a different space when it comes to digital and AI, and that data has been around forever. How you think about data maybe hasn't been. So truly, when you think about even at the dawn of time, the data is everywhere. It's in all of the environments that are around you. It's how we pull that data in and our ability to be able to use that data to make decisions and to solve problems and to communicate. So fundamentally, this is what it means to be literate across these three areas: digital, AI, and data. There's some other pieces here that also cross all of them, and that when you look at each one of these from a literacy standpoint, it also requires you to shift your mindset. You have to start thinking differently. So when you are data literate, instead of just making decisions based on your gut, you are now taking in the data around you to make decisions. So that is a different way of thinking. It's a different process that you're going through. The same is true for digital and AI. Although digital may feel like second nature to most of us at this point, it still required us at some point to shift our mindsets. So keep that in mind. And then also, in addition to that, when we think about all three of these areas, there are some social and ethical implications that we have to think of, especially when it comes to bias, so bias within data, and even when it comes to responsible use of these different tools. So fundamentally, this is what we're talking about from a literacy standpoint. Now, when you look at how these three areas interact, I wanted to come up with an example to describe this, to really illustrate the point a little bit further about how these three pieces are interconnected. And of course, I jumped on to a Gen AI tool and asked for a little bit of help, and it came up with an orchestra, which I think is really hits the point, in that the instruments themselves can be thought of as the digital technologies. So you have to have the different digital tools in place in order to be able to make music. And then when it comes to the AI technology side, it's really the conductor and the musicians. It's the combination of both of them, because without them, there's no ability to interpret and move things forward and to assess and to adjust. Then the data itself is really the sheet music. So the conductor is following the sheet music, the musicians are following the sheet music, and they're using that data to then manipulate the digital tools that they have in place. Without each one of those pieces, we wouldn't have the beautiful orchestras that we have today. So all three of these things are really critical in order to be able to make this bigger picture pull together. So when you're thinking about each one of these, they are truly interconnected. And these are skills and knowledge that each of us need to have to some varying degree. Now, we are talking about those foundational table stakes from a literacy standpoint, but when it comes to each one of these areas, they're really deep buckets that we can get into across knowledge, skills, and maturity. And when you're thinking about how do I develop my skills across all three, you may not be an expert in all three. Maybe you are an advanced beginner or novice in some of them. And as you develop your knowledge, so the fundamental theories and frameworks and content around these areas, and then you couple that with being able to display and practice that knowledge, which is really a skill set, and you couple that with your maturity, you could be in different places across this maturity spectrum that I just have a quick glance here on the right. So each one of these areas, when we are talking again about literacy, that's foundational table stakes. Yes, absolutely. Each one you can become an expert in, which is going to go well beyond that foundational definition we were talking about. And that is absolutely important depending on what your role is and the task that you're being asked to perform. So we've got all of those things in place. We understand that digital AI and data are interconnected, that to drive success, if we want to have that orchestra happening, that the harmonious, beautiful music that comes out of it, and we can think about that in the context of business success, we need to have some level, some degree of skill set within each one of these areas. So when you think about that and you think about business success, yes, we talked about the technology piece to this. You have to have these different technologies in place. You have to have a process for using each one of these things, and they have to be good. They have to be solid. They have to make sense. The third piece to that equation, of course, is the people side of things. People enable these things to happen. They maximize the potential of these technologies and use the processes in place to also do that. So we have to, all of us have to think about where is our role? What is our place within the different changes that might be happening within your organization? What are the tasks, the skills, the knowledge that I either need to perform or need to have in order to make this real? So what is the research saying on this? We get that these three things aren't going anywhere, right? Especially digital and data. They've been around forever, and then for a really long time. And AI has even been around for a long time. And all of us are getting this push to incorporate data more, or AI more, into what we're doing. So the research is telling us that in order to make this happen, we have to look at culture. That, and you can see this statistic right here around the percentage of executives who really believe this, that culture is the greatest barrier to becoming data driven. And when you think about that, the connection between all three, digital, data, and AI, data is really an interwoven piece of all of this. So culture is one of the barriers. The other thing that we're seeing that research is showing us is that skills gaps are another really big barrier to transformation, and specifically when it comes to AI adoption. So if your organization is, like many, saying we need people to be more data informed, they need to make better data driven decisions, we need to take advantage of AI. And of course, interconnected to that is digital. You have to be able to understand and use digital technologies to make this real. Skills gaps. So we're talking culture, and we're talking getting people upskilled. In addition to that, the three top fast and growing skills are specifically these three areas that we're talking about here. AI, data, networks, and cybersecurity are a piece of all of this, of course, and technological literacy. So we're talking culture, skills, and AI, digital, and data. Now, pulling it all together, when we think about what the data is telling us, what we understand as the foundations and the definition of these three areas, what does it take to make this real? So let's put the theory aside a little bit now, right? Like, we've got the table stakes, we understand what we're being asked to do to some degree. To change culture, sometimes it feels really hard. It's that squishy, strange, nebulous thing that it may not feel like it's concrete. It feels like it could be hard to change. Well, based on my research, my time working with a number of different clients that I've worked with over the years, in my time, even just thinking about people, there are 9 specific components that you have to think about. And it's really around growing people. So setting a core curriculum, which drives language. It drives all of us having the same foundational words that we can use together. And then also getting our leaders on board, getting them to understand their role And then the same with role-based education. Every single one of us needs to know our part in this process. It also requires alignment across what we're asking our people to do, what our operation models are in place, what are roles and responsibilities, how we're working with HR and talent acquisition to bring in people and support people along their entire employee life cycle. It also requires us to have a vision and a strategy. I'm sure there's someone out there saying, why didn't you say vision and strategy first? Because really, you have to have that first. Well, I intentionally placed it in the middle of this framework so that it's center to everything that you do. And it actually acts as the, you could say, North Star or the linchpin to everything. Because without a vision and a strategy, you don't know where you're going. That then trickles down into you have to communicate this out. You have to engage your people. You have to understand the impact that it has on them in terms of change. Because even if it's a small thing, you're asking someone to change, whether they're changing their mindset, whether they're changing and growing a new skill set, or gaining new knowledge. You're asking them to perform new tasks. There's some change element that needs to be considered there. And then, of course, on top of all of these 6 that we talked about, there's 3 more. You have to have support. You have to have support mechanisms in place. This can look like formal or informal mentorships. It can look like communities of practice and centers of excellence. And of course, each one of these support mechanisms have different roles in place. Now, there's 9 components. Depending on where you're at in your journey to transform, you may already have a number of these things done, and maybe you just need to consider some of them. So this is where it gets into, how do I know where I'm at and what do I need to focus on? Yeah, I understand all of these 9 components really make a lot of sense in boiling down, how do I change culture? So again, you have to take a step back and say, okay, where am I at? Where do we have our vision? Do we understand where we're heading? And then look at what are the mechanisms that I need to put into place. So how do we actualize or operationalize change, thinking about these 9 components? So I have a process that I want to walk you through. How to make this real. You have to start by defining where you're at, then assess, and then plan. There's 2 more steps after this, but I want to talk about these 3 steps first, because regardless of where you're at in your journey, you really need to start with these 3 steps. Now, you may have varying degrees to which you go through this. Maybe if you're talking enterprise-wide, your process to get through 1, 2, and 3 is going to take a little bit longer than if you're just looking at a team of people. But regardless, you need to start by defining. So what does this mean? What are your vision and your goals? You have to have that first. I mentioned that it's central to the culture change framework. It's also fundamental. It's your North Star. Then you also have to understand, what are the tasks that I need my people to do? And when you're thinking about integrating AI, you absolutely have to think about AI tasks as well. So there's going to be a analysis that has to be done. You have to think about, okay, what are the things that AI can perform really well and maybe save time for somebody who's doing X task or X job? And then I need to think about, well, what are the people, human things, tasks that I still need my people to do? So if you're thinking about AI, do not neglect to think about the combination of people and AI tasks. If you're thinking about just digital and data, you may not have as much on the AI side, but I would strongly encourage you to start thinking about that. Then align these things to skills. So vision and goals, think about tasks, alignment to skills. Then from there, you need to assess where you're actually at. Now that you have your task map out, you understand what you're trying to accomplish and the skills that you need people to have, you need to see, well, where are my people actually at? Where are my processes at? Do I have the right technologies in place? You have to dig into each one of these pieces in order to be able to get to the next step, which is planning. So you need to then, once you've got this all established, you know where you're going, you know what you need. Now you need to plan, build out your roadmap and get tactical on it. Think about the timing, think about the different tools that you need to get in place. I mean, when you're thinking about tooling, yes, it could be straightforward in that you can go buy this tool. However, there's always some timelines that need to be baked into that. And especially when you're thinking about them building processes And then you have to get your people aware and bought in and upskilled on the processes or the technology. You also need to make sure, and this is really critical, to align with your key stakeholders. You have to get buy-in from them at this point, but you also have to do some homework before you start to move forward with things. So, and not only is this critical from obviously a budgetary standpoint, and that you need to make sure you have funding in place, it's also important to get buy-in from them. I could probably have a few stories on the side around some different change initiatives that did not take place just because people did all the homework in place. They had a great plan, but they didn't get buy-in from their critical stakeholders. They didn't what that means is you need to understand what their goals are and align to their goals and understand and help them understand the benefits that these changes are going to have for them. So define, assess, and plan, regardless of the scope in which you want to make change happen when it comes to data, digital, and/or AI. After that, you can start to design and to develop and pull in all these different fun things to get the work done. And then, of course, you have to execute upon that plan, and then implementation and roll out all of the different pieces that you have as a part of your roadmap. And then you need to evaluate these things. So I'm not just saying that because, as I mentioned, data is a big passion of mine. But if you're not evaluating the performance of what you put in your place, how do you know how well it's doing? How do you know where you need to make adjustments? It gets back to that mindset of data literacy and being able to make informed decisions. You have to constantly pull in data across all of these different things that you're doing in order to evaluate. Now, the reason why I have 4 and 5 separate is depending on where you're at in your journey, your roadmap is going to look very different. So if you're talking widespread organizational change, you may start very, very slowly, or maybe you have very key initiatives that everybody across the organization can start to hit home pretty quickly together. But regardless, do 1 through 3, and then depending on where you're at in your journey, your design and development and execution and evaluation are going to look a little different. Yes, you need to do all of them, of course, to make this real, but it's going to look different again based on your roadmap. Now, once you go through 1 through 5, it really is a cycle. So depending on what you find during your evaluation, you may find that you have to go back to the drawing board and really rethink what are our vision and our goals. Or maybe you find that maybe you selected the wrong tool. Maybe you really need to go back through and adjust or buy a new tool or get a new feature or new function within that tool. Or maybe your processes were wrong and you need to fix that. Or maybe there's something around your people that you didn't get quite right when it comes to your maturity assessment. Or maybe you got 1 and 2 down really, really well, and you need to think about, okay, we've got to adjust our roadmap because there's some timelines or different implications that are coming down the pipeline. So one thing that comes to my mind when I think of timeline is you may have to now migrate your data into the new platform in a much faster time. So now maybe you have to adjust what that roadmap looks like, and you have to speed up your process a bit. So again, it's cyclical, but you may go from 5 to 1 or 5 to 3 or 5 to 2, depending on what you find in that evaluation phase. Now, how do we make this real? The devil is in the details, so to speak, where of course this is the ideal state. You've done your homework, you've gone through everything, you evaluate and you keep going. There are some different things that I would suggest everyone think about when it comes to making this successful. So I have a few different pointers that I want to share with everybody. One is, of course, plan strategically, then communicate effectively, get things right. And specifically what I mean by that is the tech, the data, the process. And really, along with that same notion is get your people ready. So to plan strategically, do your research. So we talked about getting your homework done through steps 1 through 3. This is really, really critical. And I've seen and been a part of, to some extent, or been a part of a team where we've experienced that the wrong tool was brought in. And it was often a result of speeding up that research process or feeling pressure to get something done, such as migrating quickly. And so instead of saving, money on one side of the equation, you wind up having a burden on the other side of the equation because you went through that research process too fast. It's really important to take the time up front and do your research and understand what these different tools are really going to do for you and how you need to use them. So then talk to your stakeholders early. When it comes to vision and goals and in what your stakeholders are trying to accomplish, what their objectives are. You need to understand what they are early so that you can then align your approach to supporting them as well. And by doing that, you're going to help drive buy-in, because if you can support their goals, they're of course going to benefit from it. So talk to your stakeholders early, get them bought in early. And I don't mean everybody, of course. Be selective on who you're pulling in super early. Think about who you need to pull in early. And then as you're going through your journey, you'll pull in other stakeholders at different phases. The last one I have is build an aligned, and I intentionally use aligned, business case with measurable success criteria. The alignment comes back to what I was just mentioning around vision and strategy. That's your North Star. You have to align everything to that. If it adjusts along your journey, that is okay. But at least you know you're marching in the same direction, so to speak. And then the measurable success criteria, this is where it comes down to that evaluation piece. You have to stop and look at how are we doing? You have to measure performance. So you want to set that up front. Again, it may adjust as you're going. Maybe you find out, during part of your design phase that you may not have access to the metrics you initially thought you did, which ties back to do your research, of course, but that's okay. Sometimes you have to adjust a little bit as you go. So plan strategically, do research, bring in stakeholders early, get an aligned case study with measurable success criteria. Okay. Now, when it comes to communication and communicating effectively, there's a few things I want to mention here. Is you need to create a governance structure. And I don't mean that in the sense of you've got people that are really holding a stake or trying to slow things down. I'm not saying micromanagement at all. What I'm saying is get everybody to agree on what their role is and be transparent about it. So once you get that in place, everything will be much smoother when it comes to communications and getting everybody on the same page. Now, the next piece here, as you see, monitor, report, prioritize, and action on performance across an integrated team. So yes, you need to constantly monitor and evaluate how things are going. You want to look at the performance. Then as a team, not as individuals within silos, you need to think about this cross-disciplinary. You want a cross-functional team if you're talking about widespread transformation. You want to make decisions together because there's going to be some feedback that you get that could be one-offs. They could be, just something to think about. And all of us who are in this training side of the house or education side of the house, maybe you'll hear that the voice of a instructor or on a video, someone didn't like how they were speaking. That's a one-off, right? Like I'm not talking about that data, but then there's some other data that you're going to need to action, and you want to do so and make that decision and prioritize it as a team. The next one I have called out is talk to your workforce. When you're talking about transformation, digital data and AI, this impacts everybody to some extent. People want to hear from you. They want to understand what the vision is. They want to understand the goals. They want to understand their role. And what's interesting within this bullet is you need to think about the current culture that you already have. So some people want to know the what's in it for me. They want to know the benefits to them, how this is going to be a value for them. Other people may just want to know what their role is. And what I mean by role is, what tasks do I now have to perform so that I can upskill myself to be able to do that? You need to know your workforce when you're talking to them. It's the idea of understanding your target audience when you're going to speak with them. So make sure that doing that research piece, right? So you're planning strategically when you're thinking about your workforce and how you're going to talk with them. And then the last one that I have in here is model behaviors. It's not just talking the talk, it's walking the walk. If you want your people to report out and make informed decisions on data, you need to do the same. I know that sounds really straightforward, but it's true. If you're modeling behaviors, you're showing people that you believe in your vision so much so that you are following what you are saying. So make sure that you think about the tasks that you can do as an individual to support driving buy-in and also support driving your and accomplishing your vision and your goals. Okay. Now, tech, data, process, and people, the last two. So for getting your process, tech, and data right, of course, it comes back to research again. Make sure you're assessing these technologies and make sure you're assessing them against your vision, your goals, and the tasks that you mapped out. Remember those tasks when you were doing that number one, that first step. You have to look at, what are the things that I need accomplished. It's likely that there's technology out there that looks super cool and is glitzy and glamorous and looks like so much fun. But when you boil it down, is it really going to help you accomplish uh, completing those tasks that you need your people to do? Make sure you're thinking about that. It's just a flag that when you're going to do that evaluation piece of technology that you're thinking of. The next one I have in here is evaluate and fix data and processes. So data quality is a really big thing, and you have to think about it. You don't necessarily want to migrate everything if you're in a migration project just because it's data. Think about whether or not that is high quality data that is worth keeping and migrating, or maybe you archive it in some fashion. The same with your processes. It's likely that your processes need to adjust a bit as you're thinking about some of the changes that you're going to undergo. So this also ties in, of course, to proper management. So think about high quality, think about processes in place if they still make sense, and how you're managing your data. Now, getting your people ready, last but not least, of course, is think about and prioritize what matters for your people based on your vision and goals. And what I really mean by that is, if we are asking our people to now perform new tasks, make sure they're doing the tasks that make sense for their roles and make sure they understand what that means. Then, of course, you need to prepare talent management. So I was mentioning the employee life cycle and being able to support everyone across that life cycle. Well, in order for our HR teams and our talent management teams and talent acquisition to be able to support our people, they need to understand what are those skills, which of course are tied to tasks, that these roles need to have, so that they can articulate that and they can support them along the journey, and making sure that they've got those support mechanisms that I mentioned around the framework in place, and that they've got the growth opportunities tied to that where that person is within their life cycle. You see the next one, which ties into this, is provide support, informal and formal growth opportunities. So we want to make sure that we're supporting people. So you don't want to just say, okay, we've got our tasks mapped out. Okay, you know what you need to do. You need to support people's growth along that journey. And again, it could be formal or informal. It could be e-learnings that you have mapped out based on the different skills and tasks that you want your people to do. It could be communities of practice events that people go to. It could be mentorship opportunities. You need to make sure you're thinking about this, and you want to give people the opportunity to grow and do so in a supportive way. You want to enable your people to experiment, obviously within a safe space, which is, should have put an asterisk there, in the safe space. So when you think about hackathons and community events, it really lends itself very nicely to that. Even sandboxes, if you have the opportunity to think about that, which again gets back to the research pieces. If you can build sandboxes and have people play around with them, then make sure you do it. the more you get your people to practice applying that new knowledge, the higher of a skill set they're going to have. That's what a skill is. It's about actioning the knowledge that you gain. So that's why practice is super, super important. You want to give your people time to experiment and play around with these different tools. And the last bullet I have in here, which ties it all together, and I truly mentioned it across the board, is fostering a community and culture. So you want to make sure that people are being supported in ways that align to these new tasks, these new skills that they're being asked to grow and to have, to be able to help support accomplishing that vision and the goals. And you want to make sure that people feel connected. The more people feel connected, the more they're going to feel supported, the more likely it is that they are going to be happy and support and satisfied within their role. And when it comes to change, change is really difficult. So you want to make sure you have these mechanisms in place to support people along their journey. Now, with that said, I said a whole bunch of stuff, and I'm hoping that there's some questions out there for me. And if not, we can always connect later. I wanted to share a few useful links that I have pulled together over the years. There's some specific ones that I have in here around data, AI, and digital. And then there's also, of course, some community links for our Data Zen community. So please take a look at those links as well. In addition to that, I have a paper on my culture change framework if anyone is interested in it. And I also have an upcoming white paper coming out and a podcast series. So if you connect with me on LinkedIn, which I have on the next slide, I can keep you abreast of when that's going to be published and rolled out. The podcasts are starting to roll out a little bit now. So, and the reason why I'm mentioning that is in that white paper, we have a ton of resources as well. So beyond these 4 data, digital, and AI resources, we have a bunch of other ones in case you're interested. And then last, my closing remarks, so to speak, is I want to thank everyone for attending, and especially thank the Data Zen community for allowing me to speak today. This is a big area of mine, a passionate area of mine that I really love to speak about. If you want to stay connected, please look for me on LinkedIn. I have my LinkedIn address here. You can also email me directly. And then if you are interested, I would also love to hear from you. I have a survey that I would love for you to provide me a little bit of data on. So you can use the QR code there, or we can also drop the link into the chat. But thank you, everyone, and I will pass the mic back to Andre now.
Thank you, Taryn, for this insightful and inspiring talk. And there are some questions from our audience. So the first question is, how long do you think it takes to turn around, significantly change the culture?
Oh, that's a really good question. Years, years. Culture change doesn't happen overnight. Now, it's going to be a little bit faster in pockets of your organization if you're talking widespread organizational wide change, because you're going to have people that are early adopters, people that are going to be excited, that want to, they understand the vision and they want to help you pave the way. Those people you want to grab onto really quickly and have them as a part of your plan to advocate for change. So with them, it'll be pretty quick. But then after that, it's just going to take time. And part of the reason why it takes time is people need to understand to some degree, again, their role, the tasks that they need to perform. They need to be able to practice those tasks within that safe space that I was mentioning. So going from these new tasks into essentially the business as usual is just going to take a bit of time. Now, shifting an entire mindset of an organization, for instance, to become data driven also requires those waves of time. So it's not just doing and performing specific tasks, it's also getting them to stop and say, oh, wait, when I'm looking at a report, what am I really seeing? Is all of this data true? Like, can I take it at face value? Or should I really start to ask questions around what is the sample size? Who is the target audience? So that also takes, like a muscle that you have to, over time, build up its strength and start to use it more often. So I know that's a hard answer to hear, is years, but it does take time. it really just takes time. I would be shocked if anything from a cultural change standpoint happened faster than that. So yes, a long time.
Okay, thank you. The next question is data quality is huge. Just to clean data as a first step, do you find it's overlooked or overwhelming for clients?
I would say that depending on, the quick answer is yes. It's overlooked by some and taken for granted, but then others also understand the impact that it has. So when we think about the maturity and we think about that culture change framework, there's, I have a couple of examples that are coming to mind across that spectrum. There is there are organizations out there, ones that I've actually spoken with, that have a very low data literacy maturity, and they truly do not understand the impact that data can have for them. When it comes to those organizations, they often don't understand the impact of high quality data, and they don't understand necessarily the impact in the bias that's even baked into data. So not just incomplete data and data that may not just be good fundamentally, but also the fact that bias is baked into it. For those organizations, again, typically they have a lower data literacy maturity. Other organizations are well off on their journey and they understand that high quality data is really important. But to your point, that can be a burden. That can take a lot of time to fix. But it's really, really important to take the time to do the analysis and understand where you're at and then prioritize what you're fixing because not everything necessarily needs to be fixed. So, yes, there's definitely a spectrum that I have seen when it comes to understanding the impact of high quality data. And then, of course, that snowballs from there, so to speak, with how they action and move forward with those steps.
Okay, thank you. The next one, how do you think can AI create other AI or replace people? If not, what's a blocker?
Okay, so this is a good one when it comes to AI and how people are thinking about AI. And there's absolutely a fear of AI taking over all of our jobs to some degree. My perspective, and again, this is Taryn's perspective on this, is you have to start with the tasks. I do think AI will be performing tasks that some of us do on a regular basis moving forward. Once we figure out what the AI is frankly better at than us, that's what's going to happen. Will AI completely replace humans? I truly do not think that's happening. We're at least not anytime soon, where AI is going to be able to empathize and think the way that we think as humans. And I really mean non-linearly, non-logically at times, but things that we can make sense out of. And even when it comes to the arts, and being able to delve in that area, but especially the empathizing piece. So will AI take over? My Taryn's position on this is absolutely around some tasks that AI is more geared towards and that it's better at. Will it take over all tasks? No. Will some jobs be replaced by AI? It really all boils down to those tasks that I'm mentioning. So if there happens to be a job where all of the tasks really could be performed by AI, then it's possible. It's really possible. And the reason why I'm saying this, and that may be uncomfortable for some people, but it makes me think of robotics on the floor of a manufacturing warehouse, where at some point there was a human in that place. Well, now there's some robots that are now performing those same jobs. So again, to some extent, I do think that could be true and that could happen, but will it replace all jobs? My position is no. It really boils back down to those tasks.
Okay. And the next question, also provocative. AI is using huge compute resources and puts negative impact on our environment. Do we really need to move to AI?
Oh, that's a really good question. So I I'll leave that one open. I'm not going to give you an actual answer on that, but what it does make me think of is as we are innovating as a society and we're moving forward and we are pushing to be more technologically advanced. Sometimes we take two steps forward and then we have to take a step or two back and reset on where we're at with some things. Will that happen with AI? That's a possibility. I'm not completely sure though. If I had a crystal ball and I could look into the future, I would have a better answer here. But it does make me think about that. When we innovate, we often move forward and backwards, which is we'll find out. Only time will tell with that one. But it does make me think of some innovations that have happened even here in the more recent decades around things like electric cars and using different types of technologies to support environmental change. Is we're finding out, and research is finding out, that maybe some of these things that we were trying out, maybe they aren't as good for the environment as we initially thought they were. So that's my initial take on this, at least right now, is that there's potential for us to gain a lot of understanding on the best uses of AI. And will that be as wide scope as we are thinking it might be right now? Probably not. There's probably going to be some areas where we scale it back to some degree.
I think, yeah, nowadays any action have some carbon footprint.
Yes.
Whatever you did, like search
Yes.
Google or just put a message in the chat, it's always a footprint on the planet.
Yes.
Okay, and one more question. For success factors, could you provide any real life example of measurable success criteria for
Oh,
implementation of
absolutely.
AI?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. So I my mind immediately goes to, when I think of measurable success criteria, and I think of tying this, of course, to business success. So not immediately thinking of when you think about like building out and doing education and starting from that standpoint, the initiative, whatever it might be, that you are rolling out, data, digital, AI. There's going to be some degree of performance that you want to look at specifically within that tool, that technology, and whether or not people have a specific piece of knowledge or specific skill set around these areas. And you can measure and build out metrics tied to those things. So, for instance, specifically to different events, are people using the tool more? Are they engaged with the tool? Do they like the tool? So some of those low level key metrics can absolutely be tied to performance. Now, where it gets really tricky, and you have to be really mindful on the vision and the goals that you're trying to accomplish as a business, and the success that you're trying to, how you're defining success truly within this transformation that you're trying to do, is now you have to start to think about, how do these mechanisms that I'm putting in place, the technology and how I'm supporting people, support making change to the business. Now, as you get further away from that initial piece, like I'm saying, the implementation of new tools and upskilling people around them, there's other factors and variables that you have to consider. So you can't do a one-to-one correlation on, you can't say that this caused this, as the further and further you get out from the tool and from that specific initiative or the intervention that you have over here on the far left. Now, as you get further to the right, you could look at things like, and I'm just going to give examples, they may not be the specific ones that you might be thinking of in your head when it comes to data, digital, or AI, but you could look at a reduction in, let's say, snow tickets. So, as ServiceNow tickets. So if you've got, one of your goals is to drive efficiency business wise, and you are teaching people to use a new platform, a digital platform, or even AI to help them solve some of the problems that they're trying to do, you may eventually start to see a reduction in those tickets, which then eventually could lead into driving, accounted to as driving efficiencies. So again, there's more variables that are in play with that, but it ultimately is starting to lead towards and support the ultimate goal of driving efficiencies. When it comes to, I'll give one more example, when it comes to using data and to drive more informed decisions, you can, again, have some interventions in place. You can put some new tooling in place. You can put some support mechanisms and growth mechanisms in place to get people ready to leverage data initially, so you can look at satisfaction and growth in terms of knowledge after pre and post of a program and the uptick in use of these different data tools. Ultimately, what you're trying to get to, though, is maybe as a business, you want to leverage data in a different way to find that next breakthrough. Maybe you are trying to innovate and build out new products and services. It's not a one-to-one, but over time, you might see that there's now, after implementing these new tools and shifting mindsets and observing behavioral change across the organization through conversations, through leveraging data and reports, that you now have, again, lots of variables. I'm going to keep saying this because it's hard to measure this stuff when it comes to business success, is that you now maybe you have 2 times or 3 times or 4 times the amount of innovation and products since implementation and shifting the mindsets of the organization to use data to make more decisions and to drive innovation. So it's, again, not a one-to-one. There's lots of variables and factors you have to put into place that drive that. But it's, and also it gets back to the question around how long does this take? It takes time. It just takes time to shift mindsets and get people on the same page and to get new behaviors to happen, to become business as usual, and then to see that business impact over time. So long answer, and happy to stay connected and to talk more about it offline.
Okay, thank you. Probably the last question for this session. You mentioned that required skills to work with AI are technical. Does it mean that it's hard to use AI properly without engineers?
Good question. So when we think about the levels of maturity and when we're going from novice to expert, there is a degree of increase when it comes to technical capabilities across all of these areas. It's specifically, of course, with AI is a big one of them. Obviously, with AI, you also have to tie in the digital side and the data side to that. But nevertheless, foundationally, which is why I really wanted to bring up foundational literacy to be able to use AI. The technical pieces that you need to be able to understand is really not face value, but being able to get into the tool and to use the tool. From an advanced technical standpoint, it's pretty minor, if not needed at all, to be honest. So all of us don't need to become AI engineers to be able to use AI. We can use Gen AI tools and get in there and understand fundamentally that there's data that's behind it, and that in order for me to interact with it, I have to ask it prompts in a very specific way. And that as I'm using it, I need to learn myself, as AI is learning from me, how to adjust my prompts to get the outputs that I want. So it really, again, varies on maturity across the board when we go and we think about what are the tasks that we're trying to complete, what are we being asked for, and thinking about the level of maturity that we have. The fundamental AI literacy that I think all of us really should have does not require a very in-depth technical knowledge or skill set to be able to do it. Does it require some? Yes, of course it does, because you're interacting with AI, but it's very, very foundational. And I think the majority of us should have no problem starting to kickstart that. And then if you find that you want to advance that skill set, then of course there's going to be more technical knowledge that you're going to have to gain in order to really have that deep technical skill set that you would need to advance within the AI spectrum.
Okay. Thank you, Taryn, for this great talk and fruitful discussion during Q&A session. And thanks to all who joined this session today. And in the description, you will find the video recording of this talk and presentation file. And don't forget to say our speaker thank you by awarding a badge and rating the talk. And be sure to subscribe for our channels for more content like this. And we hope to see all of you on the next session today on Winter Data Meetup. Thank you all, and see you on the next sessions. Bye.